What happened?
Just gotta find out if you got
Which what? Oh,
a
what?
here on something. We don't know yet.
Ready, tough? Good evening, folks. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council November 5th, 2018 at 6 p.m. I'd like to call it to order. We have Kevin Went of the Grace Lutheran Church to lead us in the invocation. Sir.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start out this meeting. We have a long list tonight, and so what I just encourage our council members that I'll do my very best to keep us on point and out of the weeds, and we'll just do our very best to keep this thing from running into the wee hours of the evening. First on the thing is agenda approval. Do we have any comments about the agenda as it is? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, under the consent agenda, if we can move 6E, if it's okay if we can move it under the city manager's reports. I'd just like to pull that out, or we can...
Okay. We'll just do it.
On
Is
the
that
phone.
good with you, Lance? Kyle? Yes. Okay.
And then can we move, is it okay if we move J1, move that up in the agenda?
Are you talking about my report? Yes.
Can we move that up? It just seems it's going to be late to discuss that. I'd like to give
That's fine. We can move that item up.
Want to move that into the city manager report portion as well?
Is that okay with you?
Is that portion of the meeting? Okay. Is that,
and that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
all right. So we're going to move 6E under 4. We'll put that in there just behind G. And then item 7J1, we'll do right after that. Does that sound good? Lance, you good with that? All right.
Mayor, real quick too.
Go ahead.
Item 4E, I could explain some additional changes I think y'all should make to it tonight, or I could just come back at the next meeting in 2 weeks. There were a couple other things. I read the input from the event to add to the proposed ordinance, and I figure I'd like to give you all the actual version that'll go to the LPA as opposed to kind of just piecemealing something together. But if y'all want to provide input tonight into it too, you can leave it on there. Otherwise, I would just say pull it from the agenda.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a motion to pull it and have it re-agended for the next regularly scheduled meeting.
7I? Is that what we're pulling?
4E.
4E?
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion to pull 4E.
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? The vote is unanimous, so moved. Item 4E has been pulled. We'll replace that with 7I. And 6E will be right behind that, okay? Any other changes? All right, seeing none.
Mayor, I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Unanimous, so moved. All right, we have item 1, approval of the minutes. Approval of minutes of October 25th, 2018, special city council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Just items A, B, and C, or just one?
Do you want to do all three, everyone?
Do them individually.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second, and seeing no further discussion. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Item 1B, approval of the minutes, October 22nd, 2018, special city council meeting.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion,
Second.
and I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. The vote is unanimous, so moved. And under item 1C, approval of the minutes of July 16, 2018, regular city council meeting.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Now we'll move on to item 2, proclamation, recognition, special presentations. Item 2A is structured parsing solutions. Mr. Greg Darden, would you like to approach the podium? And you have the floor, sir.
Perfect, thanks. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. To kind of set the stage, we attended a meeting, a workshop with council, a public workshop recently, and at that workshop we went through a lot of this information, but we were asked to come back and present it again, a chance for public to hear it again, and then also bring back an MOU, which I'll talk about during this presentation. So the city put out several months ago RFP 1809-PS, which was looking for a holistic team, holistic from the point of view that it was a team that could provide any combination of consulting, design, master planning, budgeting, operations, and even development services for a very specific corridor within the city, basically the area around 98 and the Harbor District, to help rectify parking and transportation issues in that part of town. After the public process was run, this city council selected, did not award, but selected our team on about August 6th. Once we were selected on our own behalf, we suggested to allow us a time to do due diligence, to perform some stakeholder meetings, and then to bring back a document that would guide the process as best as we thought it should be guided from this point forward. Since August 6th, we've had countless phone calls with groups. We've had approximately 18 meetings with stakeholders. Those meetings included city staff, they included county staff, a number of other political groups. We've held one public forum, and then we also were party to the workshop that was hosted in this room about 10 days ago. After doing all this, we felt that the memorandum of understanding outlining a phased process was the most favorable method to go forward and allow you, the City Council, to decide whether to go forward or not. The process itself that we've outlined in the MOU is a three-phase process. Phase one is what's before you tonight, which is the MOU. I'll describe that in a moment. And then if we go forward with that process, we go into phase two. If approved by your body, then into phase three. Again, I'll go through those in just a moment in more detail. Again, tonight, what we're asking for is acceptance of the phase one memorandum of understanding. So the phase one, I'm not going to read the slides. You can read this for yourself. Essentially, phase one is where our team continues doing due diligence. We continue having public meetings and stakeholder meetings, but essentially we're going to put together at least one and probably several different conceptual master plans and elements of a master plan, which could include any combination of adjustments and improvements to parking, signage, road improvements along 98, the corridor roads, but basically bring back a collective master plan or several conceptual master plans, excuse me. We're going to bring those to the public's attention, allow public input, again, allow stakeholder input. Once we get the conceptual master plan and those elements tied down, then our team will actually go to a degree of budgeting. Those budgets will include cost budgets to implement the master plan and also revenue budgets of how we're going to receive paying for these improvements. This is part of that process that this City Council recognized that was important during the RFP, rather than just putting out a request for master planning and getting back a document that might not be implementable. Our team is charged and required to bring back these budgets and these revenue analysis. Long story short, once we get the master plan worked out, the budgets worked out, then we're required to report back to you as the City Council. Give you this information, this data, and then at that point in time, this City Council can determine if this master plan or any elements of it are worthy of moving forward. So there's a check and a balance there. So essentially, that's what we're asking for tonight is the stage one or phase one, moving forward with that master plan and those budgets and those analyses. At the conclusion of the phase one, and once we give you this information back, again, it's at the full onus of the City Council to determine what, if anything, happens next. And also, all the documents and the preparations and the drawings and whatnot we prepare will be the ownership of the city, so you're welcome to do with what you please with that information at that point in time. Pardon me. So that's, I try to make this short and sweet. We've had these conversations a number of times. I'll be glad to answer questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Arden. Don't go anywhere.
Yes, sir.
Council members, any comments or questions up to this point?
I have questions, but if the public would like to speak before we talk, I'm good with that.
Well, we can go ahead and do that. I mean, we can just go ahead right into public comment. Item 3, let people share and talk about that, and we can call Mr. Darden back up here anytime. He's not going anywhere.
No, sir. I'm here for the duration.
At least not in the next hour anyways. Does that suit everyone okay? All right. Don't go far. All right, we'll go right on to item 3, which is public comments on the agenda. Items that are not public hearings, but may or may not be on the agenda. So I don't have any blue cards or yellow cards, but I will make an open invitation to anybody if they'd like to stand up, make any comments that are important to you about the city or any issues. You can do so at this time. Okay, don't rush the podium all at once, please. All right, that's interesting. We'll move right on to let's just move on to 4A, because that's when we'll get Mr. Darden back up here. Go ahead. Lance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. During our Thursday workshop, council requested that we put the memorandum of understanding for structured parking solutions onto this agenda for consideration. This item has been vetted by our city attorneys and is now before you for your consideration.
All right. In this consideration, did you have any specific recommendations other than the fact that you guys had kind of cleaned up the contract? Would you like to talk about that, Kyle?
Sure. We worked with Mr. Darden and kind of cleaned up the contract language on how the city would pay structured parking solutions. Essentially, the way the memorandum reads now, the city would pay in 3 separate installments, and this depends on the phases that are completed, the sub-phases that are completed within Phase 1 by structured parking solutions. This is it's mainly for the city's benefit so that they wouldn't be stuck with the full $150,000 if they chose to enter into the memorandum today.
And just as a question for Mr. Darden, that particular aspect, that's acceptable. Pay as you go basically is how it's all going to work down. As you get through each one of these processes, you're not investing all your efforts into it, and then the council would decide to stop midstream or something like this. We'll go one at a time. Yeah, I got a couple people that would like to talk. Mr. Dixon.
Mayor, I apologize for not being here during the last week or week before that's workshop. I was in Gulf County. And I apologize about all the time that these people have taken to look at this stuff. My line of thinking on this is that consultants, planners and engineers are basically, we're paying a lot of money a year for that. I feel like that with the new parking lot that we're possibly going to purchase within the next 6 months or so, I feel like we've done all we can in trying to provide extra parking for businesses that didn't provide enough of their own parking. And I feel like the fact that we are putting the money into and getting out of the new parking lots that we've entered into, we're doing the best we can with it. And I can't for the life of me see that I would be able to support us basically going into debt to do this. So I'm going to say now that I'm not going to be for this tonight, but certainly willing to listen to and talk about any of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And that comment right there got the board lit up, and I appreciate it for a good starter. Next will be Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Les, I'm just way off of base. $146,860 just seems like a lot of money for just the Harbor District. I could see if it was the whole town and it was in great detail, and it wasn't just the first initial phase look or whatever you want to call it. Seems like a lot of money just to get started on parking solutions, because I keep going back to 65 to 70% of our traffic on the highway is not even looking for a parking place. They're just driving through. So we're going to spend all this money to try to satisfy the 30% or 35% of the traffic that is on the road that is coming to Destin to shop or whatever, is looking for a parking place. I don't know if we just didn't realize what we were asking for. But it just, I mean, I'm like Mr. Dixon, there's no way that I can even fathom spending that kind of money on a study just in the Harbor District, and that's just basically to get a rough look at it, is my understanding. That's just the tip of the iceberg as far as when, spending money. and God only knows where that would come from. But I'm gonna, I want to hear the rest of the council speak on it first. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Next will be Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been pretty clear about this. I fully support parking solutions in the Harbor District. But based on an email we received from someone with Okaloosa County last week, showing that basically their staff opinion was that they had no interest, or that this parking lot met no requirements for them to help contribute to build this lot with the TDC, leaves a question for me: how are we going to pay for this? And I'm not prepared to commit over $150,000 to basically plan this out, knowing that the city of Destin will never have the property tax revenue, which is the bulk of which our city runs on. We'll never have the tax revenue to pay for this, and like Tuffy, I'm not going to go into debt over this. A parking lot that, like expanding our boat ramp, may be used, at capacity 50 days a year. I would like to see a study on that, because I mean, Marler lot doesn't have a car in it right now, so we're going to put a parking garage on it. But the county stance was basically, they kind of took my argument that we are subsidizing irresponsible businesses that open their businesses with not enough parking, which is true. However, I don't know what the point of having a tourist development council is, because I can't figure out a better way to develop tourism in the city of Destin than help alleviating our parking problems in our tourist district. And I think most of the council probably agrees. So without commitment from the county or the TDC in terms of funding this project, I would have a really hard time committing these funds to go forward. I would like a partnership with them, whether we bring it up through our representative, through our mayor, who I know has good relationships with lots of people in the county, and try to see if we can get the county commission's consensus on this, on whether or not this is an appropriate use of funds from the Tourist Development Council, because there is no better way to develop tourism in Destin than helping solve our parking problem. It's just not the city of Destin ad valorem taxpayers' responsibility. It's a problem I want to see solved, and the TDC has the money to do it. And so I think the onus is on your company, sir, and our board up here working with the county to get them to change their position on it, which was illustrated to us last week, and I'm sure Lance can share that information with you. And I'll support it, if we can get them on board, but I can't right now.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Next, Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. The beauty of all of this is we're not just looking at today, we're looking at the future. To address Mr. Braden, yeah, okay, fine, some of the traffic is not coming to Destin, but that's going to change, especially since the TDC loves to keep advertising us. And now with the situation a couple of counties over, we're going to get more people this coming year than we got last year, and probably continue to keep getting more people each year. And the other beauty is the public-private partnership. We don't have to necessarily fund it. It can be funded through companies that build parking garages. We make a deal with them to run it for a certain amount of time, with a certain amount of profits going to them for building it, and then we get it at an eventual time. I stated this at the workshop, that we made a promise, which is written in stone, for parking issues on the north side of the highway to help the businesses on the south. Now, that's not just one or two businesses. There may be more redevelopment on the south side of Highway 98 and the harbor area later on. And unless you start cobbling land together, you're still going to have a parking situation unless you want big giant parking garages on the south side of the highway. So that's another thing. We have the potential to move forward by allowing them to go ahead and do this tonight. of looking at our future. We're not just looking at today or tomorrow. We're looking like, 5 to 10 years down the road. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse traffic-wise. It's going to get worse parking-wise because, we're going to get more development in the Harbor District as we go along because some of those buildings on the north side will probably go eventually, and there'll be other properties. And like I said, we're restricted on the north side to how high we can build, where we're not restricted except by a council and certain codes of how high we can go on the harbor side. So to me, it's a win-win. I know that I wish Mr. Dixon and Mr. Braden had been here because we had a wonderful, lively discussion at the workshop about this entire thing. But we can do public-private partnerships and circumvent the county. Now, if the county wants to continue with the TDD of advertising us, then we are still at the same situation that I have every year. We're advertising more and more, but we're not taking care of our infrastructure. We're bringing in more people, but we're not taking care of the infrastructure we got. This is a way to start taking care of some of the infrastructure. That's all I have right now.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, let me start off by saying, obviously, we've got an infrastructure problem, we've got a parking problem, and we have to do something about it. That's clear. With that being said, I have not been comfortable since the first presentation because of several reasons. And the first one was the very first packet we received back in July, I believe it was, and then it was presented to us in August 6th. In it, there's a letter to a local developer that should have been addressed to the city, and that piqued my concern right off the bat. Why is there a letter going to a developer about a project in which that person had no land or city interest? So that was a concern which I brought up and is valid. And secondly, as I noticed in this packet, is it's talking about how we need to be removing the burdens of employee parking from businesses. And that, to me, is not what this parking garage is about. This parking garage is about securing parking for residents that want to go down to the harbor, for tourists that come down to the harbor. I don't think we should be providing parking for businesses that don't adequately have their own. I know several businesses down on the harbor didn't have enough, so they purchased additional property so that they would. So I really don't feel that this is in our best interest right now, particularly following up on what Councilman Morgan mentioned, is the email that we received noting some concerns from the county and the TDD. With this being something that's really geared towards tourism and helping the tourists secure parking and going and visiting our different things along the harbor, most definitely the TDD needs to be involved in helping us in some financial regard. I think that's almost a no-brainer, and so the fact that, not that they're reneging because there was no promise, but the fact that they have now given us some concerns is another concern that I have. So, I think this is something that we need to really discuss, really work through. Private-public partnerships are not simple. They're complicated, they have many moving pieces. It's easy for one side or the other to get caught in holding the pot of the monies that are owed to other folks. When I took a course on this with the League of Cities, we were told there's essentially two different types of public-private partnerships. One, what they considered the good kind, was a demand risk partnership, and one that they considered a bad kind was availability payment. And we haven't talked anything about what this would look like if we were to enter into a public-private partnership. Have we done any in-depth economic analysis that would justify privatization? I don't know.
I think that's part of phase one.
These are very important questions that I think we need to look into and have resolved before we put ourselves in the hole for this kind of money. And really, I guess that's about it. I mean, I just...
Before I get to Skip, Ms. Jordan, would you like to come up to the podium to answer? Because she brought up 3 critical points that I think you would like to address.
Thank you. I tried to make notes and I tried to put them in some kind of order here. So a couple of things. One, the MOU and what it represents is not just a parking situation. We've identified that your crosstown connector, the design for it as it terminates on the west side is still a gap. And we've committed to providing you that design effort, those solutions as part of the master plan, not the design, but the solutions for it. We've also discussed that this project is not necessarily about the Harbor District. This is a citywide problem. Whether you're a citizen and you're just trying to get down there to enjoy what's offered there, or whether you're a citizen that's just driving through every day because you have to go through there. So part of our solution sets, this master plan, is not just the parking, it's creating wayfinding needs, it's creating management needs, it's creating better pedestrian ways and sidewalks, better landscaping, and even, and again, before Mr. Campbell left, he had conversations with myself and also with FDOT and myself with FDOT, and there's some things that need to be addressed on 98. So this master plan is not just about parking, it's a total solution set for a district that impacts pretty much everybody within the city. The other thing I wanted to make a comment about was that we did meet with the county and we did meet with the TDD, and I haven't seen the letter or the document or email that you've got, but my personal takeout, they're not here to defend themselves, but my personal takeout was that there was interest in understanding what the needs, the solutions were, and what the projected costs were, and they were concerned about the optics, and they were concerned about making sure that this project, if it does go forward, doesn't benefit any one subset or group. With that, they seem to be pretty open-minded. As far as whether a TDD or a TDC can legally participate in something like this, it is true they can. We actually worked with other counties in Florida this year, and there's been some opinions put out by the State Attorney General that does allow these types of things to happen. I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to get into that, but these can be paid for, if you will, or partially funded by TDDs and TDCs, all the way down to transit systems. But nonetheless, I'm just trying to address some of the things I heard a moment ago, just to let you know what our beliefs are. As far as the Marler parking lot being empty, I agree. We've made this comment in this forum, this venue recently. Any parking on the north side of 98, to the most part, is going to largely be empty until there's a management program, which is again part of our Phase 1 activity, is put before you and then allowed to be implemented. Be glad to go into that in more detail, but we've discussed this once before. As far as the money side of it, yes, part of what we're doing with the MOU is creating the revenue streams, having the discussions with the county, having the discussions with the property owners to bring back a revenue solution, if there's one to be had, to help reduce the risk and liabilities of the city. As far as the letter that was in our package, you did ask about that letter in our initial presentation and may have been too quick with the answer. The longer answer is that our team recognized the importance of a piece of property that was privately held and what it could mean to benefiting parking needs behind McGuire's. On our own behalf, we reached out to that property owner and we asked that property owner to provide a letter stating that our team, and I guess for that matter any team, could have access to that property. Obviously, if we move forward with a development there, then those rights and privileges would be extrapolated to the city. We don't want to hold a piece of property. The effort was just to prove to the city council that we recognized it was a quintessentially important piece of property and that we had gone to that degree of effort during that period in time just to get control of it.
Absolutely, and I understand that. My problem was, why was it addressed to a developer rather than to you or the city?
Because we were asking, well, the letter that was, there was two things in there. One was there was a series of transgressions for how the property went from one developer to another group. I don't have that with me. The letter that was really the one that I was asking for that was important to us was just saying by the current property owner, we had access to that property for any kind of improvements to the parking transportation system if we were to go that degree. That was it. As far as removing the burdens of the employee parking, we've been pretty vocal about this. We think that there's a security and that there's a safety issue with providing a whole lot of public parking on the north side of 98, when if we could open up parking on the south side at current parking lots that are privately owned for the people who are trying to go to those venues, those businesses, then it's a safer atmosphere. So people would be driving to those parking lots now and then going in and eating and dining and entertaining and whatnot. But one of the ways to make that happen is to move the employees of those businesses to the north. My personal belief is that that should not be a free parking exercise. So part of this revenue stream is that by opening up parking on the south side, then those employees would be paying, or businesses, those employees would be paying for rights to those parking spaces. So that's kind of the reason why we were suggesting our forward-looking concepts behind the employees being on the north side of 98. As far as the P3 comment, I could not agree more. One of the first rules I speak to many groups about P3s and how to apply P3 to parking and transportation principles. It's a great tool, but if you don't pick your partner right, it's a tool that's going to fail every single time. They are complicated. And again, that's the purpose of this document. Rather than us asking for a document saying, hey, you're contracting with us and you're going to go from soup to nuts, that's not what we're asking for. We're asking for you to have faith in our team tonight and to allow us to do the studies, to put together the budgets, both cost and revenues, and then all the nuts and bolts that goes with that, and then come back to you and present it to you. If you want to move forward, fine. If you don't, we understand. But at the very least, you're going to get some very good information so that when you do decide to go forward, you've got it already figured out. And then also, as you decide to terminate Crosstown, you've got that figured out as well. So there's an awful lot of information here. Yes, sir.
When the city initiated the boardwalk on the Destin Harbor, part of the agreement between all the property owners was to give up 25 foot of their property as easement to the boardwalk. And then in the process of that, the city guaranteed that they would provide enough upland parking, because all those businesses were already maxed out by the mid-'80s for most of them. And and you guys did a parking audit. So how short of parking right now are we just for the harbor, just for the boardwalk aspect of it?
So full clarification, we didn't actually perform an audit at this stage. We looked at your parking study, which you had already paid to have done, and that parking study suggested that you had a deficit, which was now about 16 months old, but you had a deficit of about 1,500 cars. Now, the way that they calculated that deficit is they surveyed the existing businesses in the area, primarily on the south side of 98. And they looked at the type of business that was being performed, and they looked at the square footage of that business, and they applied your own municipal code that said this type of business, this type of square footage requires this type of parking. So that's how they came up with the deficit. We agree with the logic that they used. We have not gone back and validated that their square footages and their business associations were accurate. Now, the big kicker is that under their own definition, they excluded two significant parking users within that study. One is that they had no tool within your own code to analyze and suggest how short parking was as related to the boardwalk and people just simply going and enjoying the boardwalk, or the kiosks that were associated to the boardwalk, which we personally believe is quite a bit of traffic, parking traffic. The second group that they omitted under their own admission were basically the Liberty vessels or the pontoon boats. under your current code. At that time, there was no way to identify exactly how many pontoon boats or those types of vessels were out there and how many parking spaces should be associated to each type of in each class of vessel. So it's pretty safe to say that you're reasonably 1,500 short today. There's been a lot of discussion raised about, well, this is just benefiting certain groups. I'm not going to call names, but we've met with nearly 20 stakeholder groups, and most of the stakeholder groups we met with were interested in participating in improvements financially. There was one group that we met with on the west side of the boardwalk, which we've talked about in open meetings already, and they have a high interest in participating financially as well. Again, that's part of the due diligence that we'll finish up and bring you a full report back as part of the MOU.
So, and I know that you probably have seen the master plan where the boardwalk goes under Highway 98.
Yes, sir.
All the way down to the new state park.
Right.
As part of the master plan. If that was built, what would that do to the deficit if we don't address the parking situation at all? Because a couple of the council members, their solution right now is not to have a solution.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just kind of paint that picture.
So just from common sense, the boardwalk has become a destination, probably mostly for tourists, because I'm hypothesizing that a lot of citizens just don't want to get into the traffic and the problems. But it's becoming popular. As the city continues to expand the boardwalk underneath 98 and back towards the parks that you have and are planning, then that's just going to expand the use and the need and the interest of participating in those areas. One of the things that we personally believe is that some type of additional parking capabilities on the west side behind the McGuire's location is just going to benefit the ability for citizens and anybody else to get back to that expanded part of the boardwalk, increase the exposure and the usership of those areas, and then also increase the availability of usage of the parks on the west side that you're talking about, northwest side.
Mr. Oberdeer, do you have any comments? I don't know if you want to address him directly or you just...
No, I mean the only comment I was going to make, and I share what Councilmember Morgan has told us about the letter we got from the county, and what they were. I've talked with them, and what they were primarily concerned about was that we would be using public money to try to create parking that was a deficit created by private interests. And I think what I heard from you at the workshop was that you had contacted some of those people and that they were actually willing to participate in the financial aspect of these parking garages or parking garage, and that to whatever extent that's going to be, that may alleviate some of the concern that the county has in doing this or participating in this. And I think that the TDC and the TDD obviously are going to have quite a bit of money to be able to give us for this endeavor, but they won't do it unless we can show them that, hey, the people on this that have created this need because they didn't provide the adequate parking in the first place, that they're willing to now kind of step up and make up for that. And I think that's what I heard from you, so maybe you could just comment on that.
Yes, sir. I mean, again, I hate talking for someone, whether it's the county, the TDD, or whoever, but my opinion, when we met with those groups, they made it very loud and very clear that we're not paying by ourselves. They wanted to see unilateral participation from a lot of different groups. We heard that loud and clear, and without saying more than I probably should or could say, or in this type of forum at this stage, without having hard evidence, I think everybody, all the groups we met with, want to know, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking about $1 million or $100 million? Which, don't write that down. I'm just using that for an example. We've got to get the plan put together. We've got to get the budgets put together, and then we want to go back to these groups, both the stakeholders, the businesses, and explain how it could benefit them and what they would be expected to, how they would be expected to participate and get their buy-in. The same with the county, the TDD. I think we have a reasonable chance here of putting together a revenue model that would be beneficial to everybody, and would assure that we're not just benefiting any one group, business, company, visitors. I mean, we've got to make this equitable for all people, the citizens, the visitors, the county, the TDD, and the city itself.
Well, thank you, Greg.
Yes, sir.
Basically, where we're at, folks, is do we go forward with this to get a clear understanding of what we're going to do, or we just kick this down the road and not do anything? So I'd like to entertain a motion so we can either say yay or nay, or quit wasting your time, or give you the go-ahead to garner more information. So I think what we'll do is get a motion in a second, and then we can add a little more discussion to that motion in a second, if anyone would like to entertain that. Mr.
I'll be glad to make a motion,
Destin?
Mayor.
Mr. Destin?
I'll make a motion to table this item indefinitely.
We have a motion to table.
Second.
That's it, right. But then this whole issue's been tabled.
All voted on it?
Yeah, we're doing that now. Go ahead. Motion to table. You vote yea or nay, folks. You voted the way you want? Yep. Okay. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, City Manager's report, 4B.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In our Community Development Department, we currently have a planning technician position. What staff was hoping to do and able to better serve the community and get our work done is convert this planning technician position into a planning position, which would give us 3 planners on staff, which would help ease the burden amongst the 2 that are currently trying to handle all the workload. Financially, it's not an issue for this fiscal year in particular because we've had vacancies since the beginning of the fiscal year on October 1 that more than cover the cost of the additional $14,000 that a planner would cost the city. So I would put this before you for your consideration in approving this change.
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
Mayor, we need to read the recommended motion.
You want to say it out loud? If you got it ready, Rodney?
I move that the council authorize the city manager to reclassify the planning technician position to a planner position.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Destin took a potty break, but I don't think it's going to matter. You want to wait for him to vote?
No, let's go.
All right, let's just vote. It won't move through.
It won't move because he's present.
Chatham has Mr. Destin's proxy vote tonight. Oh, no, there he is. Sorry about that. That's what I thought. Vote is unanimous, so moved. On to the next one, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an update on our search for the Community Development Director. As you all know, during the past week, we invited the 4 finalists into our city to participate in face-to-face interviews with staff and to meet members of the public and members of the council. All 4 candidates are highly qualified for the position. At the end of the day, we have to narrow it down to 1. I picked a number 1, offered the position, they declined, so I went to number 2, and I have number 2 before you today for your consideration and in the appointment. And I am recommending that you approve Mr. Louis Zanguzzi from Tampa, Florida, with over 30 years experience in the planning field and as a professor in teaches planning at the university in Tampa.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Marler. Ms. Ramswell, would you like to second that?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Oberdeer.
No, that's all I want.
Okay. Any discussion? Mr. Braden.
Lance, can you tell us why the lady declined her offer, your offer?
I'd be happy to speak to y'all about that. Her indication, and I didn't speak to her directly, but I can tell you she indicated that she was in a similar position before, and she did not feel like she wanted to put herself back into a position like that at this time.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. The city's getting closer to being back to normal. Ayes have it, so moved. And how many more positions we need to fill, Lance? About 4 more?
About a half dozen. Yep.
Keep going.
We're going.
Thank you, council. We're getting closer. All right. Item D.
We have Mr. Ed Eddy here, goes by Buzz. Appreciate you coming over, making the drive, along with Ms. Jankowski to give you an update on the city manager's search.
Edwin Eddy, City of Gulf Breeze, 300 Bear Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida. We're getting closer. We're closer than we've ever been. With Karen's help and with the work that her staff has done, and the work that y'all have done, we had 54 applicants at this start of this process. We have 3 that appeared on 6 lists. We have 2 that appeared on 5 lists and 3 that appeared on 4 lists. And we have not incorporated your votes into this process at the time. So we did get a list from the mayor, but we haven't worked that into the discussion. So our recommendation would be that you would take the 3 that got 6 votes and 2 that got 5 votes, and interview those 5 people. And then, since this process has been going on for a while, you keep the 3 that got 4 votes on deck. Because we may call those 5 and have 1 or more say, sorry, but I've taken another position, or as the community development director said, I've got something else I'm waiting for, and I'd really rather not interview. That's certainly more ethical for them to do it at that point than to have y'all interview them and then say they don't want to do it. So that would be Lance Johnson, Danielle Judd, Ted Lakey, Mr. Rohr, and Mr. Rokovitz are the 5 that we think you ought to interview. And yes, sir. Johnson, Judd, Lakey, Rohr, R-O-H-R, and Rokovitz, R-O-K-O-V-I-T-Z. So I would recommend to you that you set up a date to interview those folks by telephone or Skype. And that has worked successfully, managed by the personnel department before. And I've seen it done, and it's a good way, as opposed to just a voice on the phone, to actually see and be able to interact with the person by Skype. I think is a good idea for the first step. 45 minutes each, 15-minute break. You could get it done in a morning or an afternoon sometime soon. Sooner the better, because the more time that goes by, the more opportunity there would be for somebody to be offered another job. If, as we call the 5 people, one of them says, I don't want to be considered, then I think we should move. I think you ought to move G-A-U-G-H, Goff, Morton, and Newhouse to an on-deck position. No, not necessarily.
I'm new to this, so how would we set up the Skype meeting? Because it wouldn't be done in a... Karen
Karen could set that up for you.
Last time we did this, we set up a special workshop to do that, and I've already gotten some interview questions to present to council and Mr. Eddy. So the date would be the big thing to set aside.
And I'd like to work with Karen on those interview questions. I think, the questions she's got will probably be fine, but I'd like to throw in a few also, and just for your consideration.
Do you have any
How
date-
about
do you have any
sometime
dates
next
in-
week, Mayor? Maybe the Thursday or so next week?
Yeah.
If I
Do you have
can,
dates?
if I can, I'll be out all next week. I apologize.
We have a city council meeting on the 19th, the morning of the 19th. Oh, no, or before the city council, could we do a
That's
workshop?
right before Thanksgiving, right?
Right, that's a Monday.
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Lance, are you off that week?
I am on vacation the week of Thanksgiving, and it was going to be in my announcements, so I apologize.
Can you participate on Skype?
What about the first week in December, that week right after Thanksgiving?
It's too long, but given the schedules and given what I'm hearing, that might be the best thing, to just pick a time when you can commit 4 hours,
26?
5 hours to it.
December, or November 26th, Monday? Everybody be back from vacation? You guys deserve one.
I'll be back on Tuesday.
27th?
Yeah.
You will be back, not coming back.
I'll be working on the 27th. yes.
Is that, let's do 27th then.
27th at,
Sorry about the delay. We
4
may
o'clock?
lose some candidates, but you have a few on deck.
that's absolutely, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock?
Would you say it was going to be 5 hours?
I think it's going to be every bit of 5 hours.
Karen, when did we do it last time? Didn't we do
We
it on
did it,
Saturday?
we started in the morning, didn't we? And we went
Yes,
through
ma'am.
lunch and had lunch here.
Yes,
and-
ma'am. We started in the morning, correct. We had some time afterwards for public comment, I believe. And yes, we scheduled some lunch in-house, so
9 o'clock.
that would
Good
probably
start
be,
time.
that would
All
probably
right,
be good.
9 o'clock, 27th. First day back at work, Lance.
Mayor, I had a concern that I actually wanted to bring up. Should we name our list publicly so that we avoid any potential concerns of you having polled us?
No, I don't believe that's necessary. I'd defer to the city attorney. Your lists are public. The
Because we
emails-
emailed them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If someone wanted to know what Dr.
As long
Randall
as an
was-
expert on sunshine and polling and everything agrees, I'm good.
I
I
did-
just wanted to bring that
I did not poll the
up.
council. You all submitted your lists, got a couple of them tonight, as a matter of fact. So, and Karen did a great job incorporating those into a spreadsheet. We were able to evaluate that and get you the results, so. But your list is public. If somebody wanted to know what your list was, it's.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure we covered that base.
Yes, ma'am.
For the
Okay.
record, I agree with
See
Mr.
you all
Eddy.
on the 27th.
Thank you, sir. Oh, will we get a chance to review the questions before the meeting?
Yes, sir. I would like to maybe take a day or two, submit what I have for Mr. Eddy's review, and then I would like to email it to all of you for your review as well, and if you'd like to add any questions.
There you go. So they'll have a list of questions, and then we can email any recommended or questions right back to you guys, and you guys can incorporate those. All right? Does everyone understand that? Okay. Now we're going to go to, I think this is where we put in 7I. Take it away, sir. Ma'am. No, sir.
This is Tetra Tech. This is relating to the Tetra Tech agreement that y'all had asked us to draft a letter of termination. I'm going to let Steve Bauman handle this since he handled it last time.
Good evening, all. Yeah, if you'll recall, at the last meeting, there was a vote that the council held on terminating the Tetra Tech contract. Our legal opinion has not changed so far as the right of the board to do so, but after that vote was held, we were furnished by staff with a work order number 35 that was became part of this contract that I think is an ongoing, if I'm not mistaken, Lance, ongoing work order for the Calhoun Pedestrian Improvement and Boardwalk. So We just wanted to make sure before we wrote a 30-day termination letter, if the council still wished us to do so, knowing that project is still at this time ongoing. I think Lance can update you on the status of it. If so, the termination would terminate all work proceeding under the contract that the council voted to terminate. And we just, out of an abundance of caution, wanted to clarify that. We did not find out that until after that vote had occurred.
Yeah, and I don't think the council voted on it knowing that either.
That's correct.
That's also important. Lance, you want to give us an update on exactly what that means and how it impacts not only the council but the city?
Sure. Staff, the day after council had made that motion, went back and started research. We're researching the other contract that Tetra Tech had out, and that's when we ran into this extra work order that was tied to the same contract as is the park. So we reported that to our city attorney immediately and advised them that we maybe need to let you all know because it could change your minds on your decision. So what it is, it's a conceptual drawing of the pathway going underneath the bridge. And that's what that work order was for. It was a small work order, approximately $30,000 worth. Tetra Tech has provided 2 of the drawings, conceptual drawings. I believe some of the other items that were listed on the work order that have not been fulfilled yet would be some public meetings and some other documentation. So of the 30, approximately 20 of 20,000 has been spent on this work order. So it is nearing completion. And we do have the drawings, which I believe, according to this contract, are the city's possession.
If I may make sure that, as long as we would still, the city would be obligated to pay for the work that has been done so far under that work order, and provided the city has done so, then any work product in the form of those drawings, those conceptual drawings, would belong to the city.
And you said we've already paid for $20,000 worth, Lance? So however much that gives us, that's ours?
That's correct.
I got a couple people that would like to ask you questions. First, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's time to sever the teat for Tetra Tech, so I'm going to make that motion to go ahead and terminate their contract.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Ramswell, you're up first.
Thanks. I had a question. So if we've already received 66.6% of this project, and all we're awaiting is that third drawing, which would be ours after we would pay them the final $10K, when is that third and final drawing due to us? Is there a date certain that they were to have that?
No, there was no date specified in the work order, so I can't give you an honest answer to that question.
So if we sever now, do we get to keep the two because of the 20,000 that we've already put into it?
Yes, the 2 items that we paid for already do become possession of the city.
Yeah, that would be our opinion, that whatever we've paid for to date that has been accomplished, then it would be owned by the city under the terms of the contract. And if they've done some work additional work that hasn't been paid for, that would be owed under the contract. And if they produced work product pursuant to that in the form of documents, conceptual drawings, whatever they may be, those would then belong and be owned by the city.
What was the date that contract was entered into?
The work order was prepared August 1st, 2017, and signed by the city manager August 10, 2017.
So they've had a full year to give us 3 different drawings. Okay.
Mr. Overdeer.
Okay, so if we sever this contract, then we've still got work to do on the new park, right?
Continuous service contract.
And we've got somebody that we can just implement this continuing service contract and finish that up?
Well, we have a continuing services contract with an engineer. What we have not reached out to him yet. We wanted to know the outcome of this before we did, to see if he can handle the additional workload. If he can't, we can go out for another continuing services.
And the reason that we're doing this is because Tetra Tech wanted to charge us $30,000 to finish it up, right?
That's correct.
For me personally, this has to do a lot with how we've been charged and how they've handled the Heritage Park construction in different phases and billing. This second issue that was brought up this evening, for me, was irrelevant coming into tonight.
Mr. Marler.
Thank you, Mayor. All we're doing, whether or not we vote to get rid of them, is we're kicking this can down the road again. First, we've had lawsuits and everything else, and we still have no park. I'm getting frustrated that, you know, as long as we've had this property, as long as everything's been going since I was on council previous when we purchased the park, now we're going to sit here and we're going to hopefully get the final plans, and what if those final plans don't agree with the next engineering company we hire to do all this stuff? Now we're back to square one again. That's all I have.
All right, so I guess it's time for a motion and a second and a vote on what to do here. You did. You, Rodney, you made a motion, and who seconded it? And Tuppy
Let me make sure what the motion is. Is it to reaffirm the decision to terminate and instruct us as your attorneys to write a termination letter giving 30 days?
That is
termination
correct.
Notice?
That is correct.
Got that. Got a motion, got a second. Any further discussion on this issue? Seeing none.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and abstain. I do have relatives that own corporations that are in litigation with regards to the park property, so it may be tangentially related enough, so I'm just going to abstain.
Ayes have it, so moved.
Thank you, and we'll get a letter out in the next few days.
All right, that takes us to, we interjected before we got to F's, 4F, we're going to talk about 6E, which is the marine construction at Captain Leonard Destin Park at 101 Calhoun Avenue. We moved it. Okay, and who wants to, Lance? Or is that the attorneys are going to have the first shot at that? I think that's you, Mr. Kyle.
Sorry, we're playing a musical attorney on you guys.
Really what it looked like. The appearance of that was you got kicked to the curb, but we won't go there.
Yeah, let's not go there. Yeah, this is an item I want to address y'all on, because this is an item that came before the Harbor and Waterways Board, which I've been representing them for the last 3 meetings or so. And it's a great board, and they do a great job. They need some more members, but they do a great job. Anyway, this item, this is really my mistake. The Harbor and Waterways Board approved this plan to go forward. At the time, I had not reviewed the documentation sufficiently enough. And when I was reviewing it this morning, I came to the conclusion that I really need probably 3 to 4 more hours to sufficiently review it. So I just ask that you continue this to the next meeting until I've had a chance to review it, and then I'll bring back to you.
Motion to continue.
I have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Seeing any further discussion? Ayes have it, so moved. Normally we break at 7:30, but it already seems like we've been here for 5 hours, so let's just take a 5-minute break. I gotta pee. Oh, I remember.
And we've contended for that. We went to the TED and talked to James, general concern, we need to do some.
Did you talk? If y'all can make it to your seats, we'll get the show rolling here. We're making good progress. We're getting a lot done. All right, folks, we'll get this thing started. We're back, we're still in item 4, city manager. So Lance, if you'd like to go with 4F, give us an update, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to turn this over to the city attorney.
And Mayor, I'll give a quick overview, and then I'll turn it over to Steve Schmidt, because he's the one who's been fielding all the phone calls. But the way the original livery ordinance was drafted, when you kind of line it up with the, not livery, the Harbor and Waterways ordinance, when you compare it to the state statute, it actually, to enforce it to the faithful wording of the ordinance, you actually have to prevent any anchoring at all in the harbor. And he's been receiving a lot of complaints about that for obvious reasons. And so we're here tonight to get a little bit of direction from y'all, because we can come back at the next meeting with some revisions to the ordinance to kind of clear it up, to maybe allow anchoring of regular registered vessels, if that's what y'all want to allow at this time.
Yeah, and this is a big issue for me because this is right up my alley. With our IFQ red snapper fishery, we got guys that give a 3-hour notification, but one of the rules, federal rules, is they're not allowed to unload their fish until daylight hours, but they're also not allowed to come to the dock. So they have to anchor out just off of Fish and Fleet, you know, where they unload. So that would be, the language that's in there now is very problematic for those guys. Plus, we live on the intercoastal waterway. We got travelers that come, you know, and may be delayed, and they get in at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and, you know, they don't have a place to dock yet, or they haven't been able to communicate with people, and they come in there and anchor up for the night. And then we just have weekend travelers that like to come and anchor in the harbor and paddle their little boats over and walk the boardwalk and eat at our restaurants, stuff like that. So we need to do something a little bit different. One thing I would recommend is there's communities, boating communities like Key West, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that have had to deal with the liveaboard, long-term derelict vessels, stuff like that, and I'm sure they got ordinances and revisions to their rules and regulations that we could maybe copy some of the things they've done to address that.
They actually have such a powerful lobby. Those are the communities that are actually by statute have it spelled out. There's some exceptions, and they actually have a very well-written statutory provision for Miami and Naples and some of those other South Florida communities that only cover them. Regarding the commercial fishing, Mayor, and I'll get with the sheriff on this, there actually is an exception in the statutes for commercial fishermen regarding these type of regulations anyway, and so they don't have to worry about losing any of their catches, I think, over the next couple of weeks before we get any revisions done, so we can talk about that.
Just want to make sure that what we do, short-term and long-term, address these situations, because we want to be conscientious about, we are a boating community, always have been. We're a fishing community as well, so we got to find that happy place. Derelict vessels has always been a problem. Liveaboards have been a problem too, so I think, you know, as you guys are looking at these language and revisions, that you maybe take a lesson learned, and maybe we don't have a designated anchorage right now. Maybe that's where we need to look at, to where if you're going to come here and anchor, this is where you got to do it, and we keep tabs on that. Even though we don't have a harbor master, we can still probably take care of that. I got a couple people that would like to weigh in. Mr. Braden, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we move this item 4F to the next scheduled council meeting.
We got a motion?
I'll second it, Mayor.
Got a second? Mr. Dixon, would you like to say something?
This 4F is Belcourt Drive, something?
City manager report.
Okay, on the city manager report. No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion.
For clarification.
But you want some direction.
Do you want us to come back with those amendments to the ordinance to allow boats to anchor in the harbor, or do you just want to continue?
No, I think we need to allow boats to anchor in the harbor. I don't know if we need to put a date, or a time on it, you know, or so many days.
Here's the way the statute works. If you decide to regulate it all, you have to go through a whole separate process with the state. So it's just, you either got to allow all of them or don't allow any of them. So we'll need to reword it to allow all the vessels to anchor, and we can't put any time restrictions on it at this time.
Even the floating structures?
Well, the floating, that's different. The floating structures and the liveaboards are actually accepted out there in their own separate categories. Those are covered under the ordinance right now, and those have some prohibitions already in there that won't be changed by this. This is just dealing with regular boats that, either sailboats or motorized, but anyone who wants to just anchor their boat for a couple of days anywhere in the harbor. The liveaboards, though, they are covered under the ordinance, and that won't change. And I think it's 30 days you have to give them to be classified as a liveaboard, but they can be removed, so.
And if we do a mooring site, we have to provide laundromat, bathroom facilities, that thing. So I think we all shot that down, doing a mooring field. And then we was looking at creating a Destin as a port to try to get this. I guess that has.
That's actually much harder. The mooring field could be a possibility if y'all can have a park that you could put showers in it. I think that's the biggest issue. And so if you can find a park, you could gerrymander the edge of that mooring field out to a bigger centralized location, as long as you have like a little pathway that touches a park. And
okay.
So either the Heritage Park or the park they're building at the end of Holiday Isle probably would be the logical choices, but that's just a starting place for y'all to discuss.
I got two other people that want to talk. Does that answer your
Okay.
question, Mr. Braden? Because you made the motion, so.
Then, yeah, we'll leave that motion as to allow those vessels to anchor.
In the interim. Steve, would you like to weigh in on this particular issue real quick before these other two council members?
No, I'd just like to reiterate that the ordinance as it's written really covers floating structures and liveaboards. I mean, they're specifically accepted in that ordinance. Other than that, I think you guys handled it very articulately.
Okay. I've got Mr. Dixon, then Mr. Marler, and then Mr. Ramswell.
Some of the things I've seen them doing is some of the junk they have at Crab Island. When I say junk, I mean junk. They're getting that registered as vessels. So, I think we're going to have to be very careful with that, and the fact that some of that junk is being registered as vessels. So I don't know how we're going to differentiate those two. So I don't know what to do with that one, but I do know that some of them are being registered as vessels. I don't know how or why or what, but I think we're going to have to somehow weed through that, because if we do that, that will be in our harbor, and I can't live with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Marler.
Duffy's along the same line, but I think, because I kept looking, I'm trying to find exact, it says where the definition of vessels is, and my understanding is vessels is a motorized, operational as like a boat or something like that. It would be vessel where the structured issue is just a barge with nothing on it.
Typically, a vessel is registered with the state and capable of navigation under its own power.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
make sure that's in there.
25 horsepower motor, and they're registered. Ms. Ramswell.
So I just want to have it clarified. The way we're discussing right now, rewording it such that we would allow the mooring or the anchoring of any vessel, is there a time restriction on that? And then should we? And then the next question is, how do we escape the issue of having them moor there indefinitely?
After 30 days, by state statute, it becomes a liveaboard per the definition of a liveaboard vessel, and we incorporated that into the ordinance. So if someone moors in one place for 30 days, then they become a liveaboard vessel at that point in time. There's some other standards you can use too, so it's not, they can't just get away with it if they're out there. But regarding the times, you really can't. You're getting into regulating at that point. You either just have to do a blanket prohibition, no anchoring, or because if you get into the times, that turns into regulating, and it's very clear if you decide to regulate an activity like that under the state statute, then you have to go through a whole separate process that will take a lot longer. And really, I think your best solution is the mooring field if y'all explore that in the future. And I know Matt Trammell's been here before to talk to y'all about that. There's a lot of virtues to using that.
Is there a high incidence of folks, and I honestly don't know, is there a high incidence of people that will moor for 30 days and then literally just putt up and down once or twice and then moor again for another 30 days to bypass that?
Under our,
They got to leave state waters.
well, under our ordinance, a liveaboard can't move within 8 miles. So they have to move within 8 miles away to do, or they're still considered a liveaboard.
Great, thank you.
If we had a harbor master, we could probably keep an eye on all that, but we'll have to revisit that at another day. I think the motion was, if I got you right, Mr. Braden, is just that for right now, the present ordinance, just remove the language about no overnight mooring at this present time out of the ordinance and bring it back at the next council for a vote, correct?
I'm going to ask the attorney on that one.
Actually, what we'll do, we're going to add some language that makes it clear that regular vessels are accepted out, but same effect, Mayor.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second.
So moved.
Let's go ahead and vote. See no further discussion? Ayes have it, so moved. On down, Lance, to item 4G.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an update on the Code Compliance Manager. We received applications for the position, scheduled interviews with 2 qualified candidates. Both would do very well in the position. I have selected Mr. Joseph Forgione and would ask that you confirm him as our new Code Compliance Manager. He has knowledge of the area and working knowledge of our codes already, and working knowledge with our staff already. So he's the right choice for this time.
Mr. Braden.
I move to approve the city manager appointment of Joey Forgione to the position of Code Compliance Manager.
We have a motion, and I have a second from Mr. Oberdeer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, so let's vote. Oh, sorry about that. I kind of got ahead of myself. Unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, Lance, item H.
Thank you. The only announcement I had was that I am going to be out of state the week of Thanksgiving. I'm going to go see my mother, who I haven't seen in many years. She's 85, so it's time for me to go make the journey back to Illinois and see her. And we'll do it. While I'm out, Mr. Webb Warren will be acting city manager with full signature authorities.
All right, at this time, we have 3 readings of ordinances that require public hearing. We're going to move right into item 5A, the second readings of ordinance 1822CC. You can take that away, Kyle. Go ahead.
Yep, this is ordinance number 18-22-CC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Chapter 13 of the City Code of Ordinances, creating Article 9 of the City Code of Ordinances for the purpose of establishing requirements for wireless facilities in the city rights-of-way, creating Section 13-175 title, creating Section 13-176 findings, intent and purpose, creating Section 13-177 definitions, creating Section 13-178 registration, creating Section 13-179 notice of transfer, sale, or assignment of assets in public rights-of-way, creating Section 13-180 permit requirements and conditions, creating Section 13-181 standards for compatibility with surrounding neighborhood, creating Section 13-182 enforcement of permit obligations, suspension and revocation of permits, creating Section 13-183 appeals, creating Section 13-184 insurance, providing for severability, providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
That was a lot. You take a drink of water after that one. We have, at this part, we'll open this ordinance up for public comment, if there is any. Seeing none? All right, we'll entertain
I'll make that motion.
a motion. Go ahead.
I move to approve ordinance 18-22-2018 on second reading.
All right, I have a motion. Ms. Ramswell?
I was just going to make the motion, Ms. Second.
All right, we got a second from Ms. Ramswell. Any further discussion? Seeing none? So, ayes have it, so moved. Take a drink of water and do it again.
Sorry about that. We got ordinance number 18-06-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to establishing the Technical Review Committee, TRC, to streamline the process of development review, providing for amendment to Article 2, Administration, revising the development review process, providing for amendments to Article 3, Definitions, Yard, providing for amendment to Article 5, General Provisions, providing modification to Article 6, Concurrency Management System, providing for amendment to Article 20, Building Regulations, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date, and this is a public hearing.
At this time, would anyone from the public like to weigh in on this ordinance? This is the second reading. It's your last opportunity to weigh in. Seeing none, Mr. Destin.
Oh, actually, I had a discussion item. I'll let somebody, I don't have the actual.
I got it, Mayor. Okay, I move that City Council approve ordinance 18-06-LC on second reading and authorize its execution by the mayor.
Second.
And I have a motion and a second. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Kopp, has anything changed from first and second reading? I know we had a bit of a gap there, but everything's good? You're comfortable? Okay. No further questions.
I don't have anybody on the board. Seeing no further comments. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Item 5C, take it away.
All right, I'll have a few comments after I read this title too. This is ordinance 18-27-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, relating to the purchase of certain real property, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for City Council approval of a contract for purchase of property located at 108 Seibert Avenue, Destin, Florida, and providing for an effective date. On this, I believe most of the council is aware, this is that parcel of land that's kind of landlocked in between other city-owned property. We actually recommend that prior to approval of the first reading that y'all authorize an environmental survey be conducted and that happen before you approve it. So what we'd actually be looking for is a motion to direct staff to order the environmental survey and then bring it back for first reading after that survey has been conducted.
And just for the public record, would you share with us why that recommendation?
It's more of a good practices standpoint as opposed to a legal requirement. We believe that if later on the seller was trying to enforce the purchase agreement, the city would be in a stronger position if the environmental survey uncovered something to rescind that agreement. So.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to authorize the attorneys and staff to conduct an environmental survey on 108 Seibert Avenue, and let's place item 5C on the next regular agenda.
It might be better to place it on the agenda after we get the results of the survey.
There we go. I'll amend my motion to continue this item until after we get the results of the environmental survey.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Mr. Marlar.
Just curiosity, since we own the land on both sides, I was just wondering why we would do this. I know it's just a small sliver of land, but we already own the land on both sides. And did we do that when we purchased the other two parcels?
I just purchased some land in Alabama, and that was one of the things that you have to do just to make sure that there hasn't been a toxic waste or somebody that had that land previously been changing oil there, and you have an issue later on, and then the city would be liable for the cleanup. By having the environmental study, it may cost a couple $1,000 now, but it could save you 20 or 30,000 or more if you end up finding out you bought a toxic waste dump.
I totally understand that part, but I mean, we own the land on both sides. Did we do that with the other two parcels as well?
I don't know if it was done. Maybe it should have been, but that's a good question, Kyron, but I just wanted to make that statement. Mr. Braden.
I was just curious if anybody knew what a cost estimate would be on that.
I think for a property that small, it'd be less than $2,500.
Okay, thank you.
Ramswell.
This is sort of a totally out there question, but I have to ask, does an environmental study, would it look for human remains, knowing that we have a cemetery near there? I know that sounds crazy, but...
No, what we're talking about is what they call a phase one, which is basically where they just do background check of the history of the property. They don't do any boring or anything. That would be a phase two, but they just do basically a background study to make the owner comfortable that there's not been any releases of any toxic substances or other issues.
Thanks.
That's a question for Halloween.
Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, we might find Jimmy Hoffa. You never know. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion. Thank you very much. Ayes have it. So moved. All right. Now we're on the consent agenda. Lance? Anything? All right. Can I have a motion?
Can we do all of them, or do we?
Motion to approve.
All of them? All of
I have
them?
all of them. I have a
All right.
motion to approve.
Second.
And I have a second.
Except E, which we pulled, right?
He's
Yeah, that was
not
already
in there. We've already, that was a separate deal. Seeing no further discussion? Ayes have it, so moved. All right. Good thing we took a break at 7 because we almost got done with the meeting before 7:30, which is wonderful. Mr. Braden, item 7A, appointment of Captain James Green to the Harbor and Waterways Board. Take it away.
Yes, sir. I am going to appoint the Captain James Green to the Harbor and Waterways Board.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. And Jim's not here to defend himself, so let's hurry up and vote. Ayes have it, and I'll text him and tell him he's being penalized once again.
And I'm done, Mayor. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you, Rodney. All right. Anything else, sir? You got it? Good. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to follow up on the structured parking solutions discussion from earlier, and that in particular the email that we received noting some concerns from the county and the TDD. I wanted to make sure that we don't just drop this. I would like to continue working and reaching out to the TDD and the county, because clearly we do need to address the transportation and the parking issue here, perhaps with structured parking solutions, but we've got to figure out the financing and talk with them. So that's pretty much the only thing that I had this evening.
Mr. Dixon.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Oberdehr.
Just a couple of FYIs. A couple meetings ago, I think we started talking about the Stallman and 98 intersection. And I talked to FDOT, and that intersection is on their radar. They're scheduled in FY21 to come out and look at that intersection and decide what they want to do or what they can do to help alleviate the problems that we have there. And while they're looking at it, they're also going to look at the crosstown connector and how that's all going to fit in and work so that people coming down the crosstown connector can get through the intersection and get onto 98 in the same way getting off of 98. Once they look at that and come up with some suggestions on what they think needs to be done, it'll go on that 5-year plan. Once it gets on the 5-year plan, then that's when it'll kind of be on the radar for the TPO, which, as they pointed out, I'm on the TPO. And what I would try to do when it gets on the TPO or when it gets on that 5-year plan is to work it so it doesn't take 5 years to get it done, so that we can try to move it up and show that there's some priority on it, because it needs to be done about the same time that we get the crosstown connector done. So, and what they want to do, what FDOT likes to have is input from the city. So what I would suggest is that when we get the city manager in place and we got get a new engineer in place, that we then do some things that we can have an input from the city to FDOT to make their job a little easier, but also to make sure that what FDOT comes up with is what we want them to do.
Skip, wasn't one of the county projects with their sales tax money going to be Stallman in 98 improvements?
I think they'll put some money into it. They can put some money into it, yes.
Because when they came here, that was one of, and I've seen it on their priorities list on their website, that is one of the projects.
And that's
so would you get with the county and figure out exactly how they plan to help us there?
Well, I think what they're going to be looking at is what they can do in conjunction with FDOT, because we wouldn't want the county doing something and then FDOT doing something else. So, I mean, if we can get that.
I just want to make sure y'all three are on the same page.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the only other thing that I had was, and this is just, I think maybe just for me, because I went over to Fort Walton when they did the presentation on the Brooks Bridge, and that got me thinking about our bridge. And so I got with FDOT again and kind of started talking with them about our bridge. And our bridge, they inspect bridges every 2 years, and they inspected ours the last time. And the score on our bridge was a 90 on a scale of 0 to 100. And the Brooks Bridge is a 46. And what that does is that gives them an indication of how fast that bridge is going to deteriorate. That's why that bridge is being replaced. But ours being at a 90, we have absolutely no problems with it right now, and it'll be many years before we have to worry about our bridge. So you can just rest easy as you drive across it.
Just like they did with the beach access initiative with me, do you think we can take appoint Mr. See how you're already on the TPO that we can rely, the council rely on you, Skip, to participate in that discussion with the DOT and the county? Can you carry that ball?
Sure. Yeah,
if that's acceptable to everybody, and then you work with the new city manager engineer and keep this fresh and keep us up to date.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, it's going to be the city council that's going to have to make that recommendation on what we want to go to FDOT with. But I mean, yeah, I'll work with them.
But the county has pledged their financial support, and I just want to hold their feet to the fire on it, because if the sales tax passes, if not, the discussion's moot.
Tag, you're it. What's this? Oh, yeah, that's my little button. All right, Mr. Marlar.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have is just to comment on what Skip was just talking about. The interesting thing with that is the west, I know you were talking, I'm sure you're talking about the westbound lane of that, because the westbound lane was actually completed 2 years after Brooks Bridge was completed. Brooks Bridge was in 67, the westbound lane was done in 69, the eastbound lane was done in 74, so that's how the bridges are. But it's interesting that in the span of the 2 years between the two bridges, apparently they figured out some engineering problems and fixed it better. That's all I have, Mayor.
Mr. Destin.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mr. Morgan.
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor, before you start, can Ms. Kopp and I just go real quick and get our quick little announcements done before your presentation? Because there's something tonight I wanted to add.
You just want to go home.
I rode here with Mr. Bauman, and he's stuck here, so.
All right, go ahead.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
Thank you. I don't have anything.
Nice try.
Chivalry is not dead in this room.
Thank you.
And
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know if Mr. Bauman has anything too, but I was actually talking with Mr. Schmidt about the mooring field idea, and that's something maybe y'all should think about doing a workshop on. Maybe in the future. I know the holidays are coming up, you might want to wait till next year, but I know Matt Trammell did a lot of engineering work on this and worked up quite a bit of stuff to kind of present to y'all, and I think it's just kind of been like in a holding pattern for at least half a year now.
And I think we got so much stuff stacked up for the 19th that, and then you got Christmas, so we'll probably get it on the agenda, the first meeting in January. Would that give you, Kyle, that give you a target?
Yeah, and might be good to engage Matt Trammell too, because I know he has a wealth of knowledge in that area.
All right, our new city manager, if we have one hired by then, can deal with that, and if not, our interim city manager can make sure that happens. Okay? All right. Anything else from anyone else, real quick, before I get into my presentation? Let's see, do I hit which button? Web. Gotta love technology. especially when you don't understand it. There we go, Public Beach Initiative. Let's go first slide. July 26th of 18, the motion was made by Mr. Destin to authorize myself to lead the initiative of trying to acquire more public beach access with assistance from the city attorney, Jeff, and city land use attorney, Kimberly, and to have preliminary discussions with landowners and at their discretion. It passed 7-0. And the direction that I'm asking for tonight after this presentation is just to prioritize available land options, identify, decide upon funding sources, and guidance moving forward. What we may do is, as you know, under item 7, I don't like to do any legislation, so I not necessarily be asking for any motions tonight, just to give everybody something to think about, and we'll get it on the agenda to make some official actions at our next council meeting. The need for public beach, seeing how the customary use reared its ugly head at the state and the county next to us the past 2 years. It seemed like this issue was brought to almost to a boiling point, even in our community. What was created out of that customary use ordinance and the ensuing lawsuits, and then the state passed a law, is people begin to realize that the city of Destin doesn't have very much public access. Most of our beaches were privatized back in the late 70s and early 80s as the development of beachfront property along Old Highway 98 took place. There's articles in the paper. Some of the comments in the article was really about some of the issues that not only our visitors were experiencing, but even our residents. You don't necessarily have to read all this. Was in your briefing, or these were just part of the newspaper article, and so it became real apparent, and this is why Mr. Destin made the motion, that Destin hasn't acquired any public beach access in 30 years, at least, and because of the issue. I think all of us are pretty much agreed the fact that this is an area that we need to look at. There's also some timing issues with what happened with the BP oil spill. The money that was brought into our area through the Triumph funding, trying to find private beach access also fits right into the Florida land grant of trying to find public or lands to buy, the state to buy. We've got a real nice park as a result of it. But as this took place this summer, we started, I'm sure all of you read them, we started getting emails from not only visitors, but even our own residents citing the need for it. And so really what was brought to light is how little access we got. And under this slide, this is right here behind June's Dune, but right here gives you an idea of what our access, public beach access in the footprint of the city of Destin. You got June's Dunes, 80 feet. The shores at Crystal Beach is 68 feet. And then the rest of it's James Lee Park, which is 1,500 feet. So we have 1,648 feet of total public access in the state, or in the city of Destin. And
is that square feet?
That's linear feet, beachfront. That's it. And the majority of it's owned by the county. So you see what we have of public beach access of the city of Destin is, 148 feet. In this next slide, you see the public beach access points, but most of them, that's all there is. You got a gate or a walkway, and you get on the dunes, and on both sides of the dunes is private beach. And that's where some of and this is Crystal Beach here. So also on that slide is a couple pieces of property that we have identified that we can look at to purchase. The first one is that that I'm excited about is Capri on the Gulf. It's 2.1 acres. It's got 300 feet of beach access, which is twice as much as we have right now, just one piece of property. We've spoke with their homeowners association. In fact, they came to us first when Mr. Destin actually brought the motion up. The president of the homeowners association came up to us right after that meeting because he had caught wind that we were having these discussions and said that their property would be available to purchase. Their attorney's here tonight if you guys have any questions about it. Their asking price is $13.2 million. It consists of 22 condominiums that are presently on it. It used to be a hotel, and they knocked the walls out and created these small condominiums. Unlike most condominiums, the people that have those actually own the land underneath their condo because they're all ground floor. They're not elevated. And so there's 22 deeds. Most all of their folks have agreed that they would be interested in selling their property. A lot of that stems from with the passing of the new comp plan. Their ideas to develop it and turn a profit were dashed because yeah. So they can't they couldn't. So that created a buyer's market, I guess, if you would, or they become sellers or interested in it. And I think the only glitch is they had maybe 2 holdouts, and that issue might be able to be addressed by their attorney tonight if you have any questions concerning that. But as I present these next 2 properties, one of the things I want to see is get a little direction on the prioritizing these properties. So this one is the most spectacular. The funding source, if we're going to use Florida Land Grant or Triumph funding, most cases I would assume that they would want us to bulldoze those units and provide a pavilion or showers or, you know, a place to grill out or something like that, not necessarily create it, turn it into a parking lot, try to restore some of it into its natural state. But more importantly, if you look at just the acreage and the beachfront, the location of it is really critical in that Crystal Beach area because it is a walk to destination, and it's in an area where there's no beach access at this time. This is a frontal view of what it looked like from the highway. Each one of those units, when we first talked, they said, you know, they're all in good shape. They've been all remodeled, and one of the president offered, well, you could just knock down 2 sets of them and leave one up for a kiosk or something like that. But I don't think in the grants business that they're going to allow you to rent them out or create revenue source. So pretty much any of these properties we buy is going to require bulldozer work because we're providing beach access, not some type of economic engine. That's an aerial view of it. From that aerial view, you can see how much beach there is behind it. It's 300 feet, 100 yards. It's not only do you have the 300 feet, okay, this is Gulf Front Crystal Port. This is the second piece, and this one is already for sale. Steve, do you remember what the sale price was? $3.6 million. It's a smaller piece. It's right next to our existing beach access. I think we have, 7 parking spots at that in a little pavilion by there, but it's exactly next to it. That would double the size of our beachfront, which is about 60 feet. I can't see the slide from here. Yeah, so that would give us 125 feet or 130 foot. Again, that area right there be bulldozed. The property owner that has that for sale also owns a lot next to it, that vacant lot. It's in a different corporation and would have to go through some legal wranglings, but in the interim, they said they'd be willing to lease the beachfront until that could be accomplished and then maybe purchase at a later date. That's an additional 58 feet, which would give us close to 200 foot of beachfront eventually.
Which, is that Shira? What is that?
Into Crystal Beach Drive.
And to Crystal Beach. Yeah, there's Hutchinson. Here's the street view. You see there to the left our existing beach access with our whopping 58 feet. Is that what it is, I think? It's not very much. And the condos there with the other side, that would all be bulldozed down, and I would imagine we could add a few parking spots. Again, the majority of these access points will be used by people that are either using golf carts or walking from the Crystal Beach area. So it's not like we want to try to build big parking lot or have big parking areas. And the last piece is a very controversial one, to say the least. And instead of calling it a park or beach access, I felt we could call it East Pass Preserve. Parcel B at some day can be developed. If we wanted to make sure there would never be development, this would be something to look at. With Parcel B, which is 11.69 acres, is 20.35 acres of deeded public access to that state land. So if the city would purchase that piece of property, it would also gain the deeded access to the state park land. So we would have control of that. There's a couple obstacles of that property. There's a issue with the access through the Osteen parcel. There's some ambiguities there that would have to be settled by our attorneys on that. Those are the three properties.
Mayor, doesn't that piece of property have like a spoil easement on it and?
Yes.
And basically, so they could come in there and you could not have a beach for a long time.
Yeah, there's been discussion that spoil area, when it was designated back in the 50s or 40s or whenever it was, it could be moved over to the west side of the jetties on the opposite side of East Pass. So that's just something. That's just like I said. This particular parcel's got some issues that we'd have to look at.
Yeah, that's a lot of issues, I feel like.
Yeah, well, we all know the politics behind it, but one of the big issues were the capability of condos or something to be built there at some later date, and this would dip that in the bud if the city owned that.
Did you get an idea on the price of that?
We do not have a price on that yet. The landowner is supposed to get a hold of our attorneys late this week with that, and we can bring that up at a later date. I assumed that the other two pieces of properties would be higher priority by this council, and this one would be probably the bottom one. So, we have time to look at that. Like I said, I'm not going to entertain any motions tonight. I'm just trying to show you what we have found through Mr. Burns and Kyle and myself, talking to these different landowners. At the same time, we did put out that if there's other interested parties that have property they'd be interested in selling. A couple came forward, but unfortunately most of their properties were like sandwiched between two houses that were already built, and that's not what you want, a 50-foot public beach in between two private homes. The other two properties, the Capri and the Crystal Port, make a lot more sense. Now,
real quick, just one thing on Parcel B, the owner of that property also did make it clear to us when we talked to him, if you remember, that he would want to reserve the right to still put beach chairs out there too.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I think he actually was not going to sell 2.1 acres.
Yeah, yes, there was a certain acreage that he would retain himself.
But, so anyways, those are the properties, and I got a couple people that would like to ask some questions, and we'll just start first with Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, want to commend you for all of your efforts in going and seeking out these properties and taking this bull by the horns. It is it's vital, actually, for us to be able to procure as much public beach access as we can. As I said in previous meetings, this is the largest existential threat we have, which is all these people that are coming to visit are not staying in most of the amenities that have dedicated beach access, but they're relying upon the public's reserved access, and we just don't have very much. So thank you for doing all of this. With regards to direction, I would say let's seek as much further negotiations as we can and clarifications with the Capri. And then in the order that you gave, I still stick with number 2 as the smaller parcel in Crystal Beach, and then number 3 would be the East Pass Preserve. Regarding any direction you might want, my opinion with regards to financing, I would certainly seek preliminary negotiations with the TDD, our local TDD, and further Triumph Gulf Coast. I believe they're going to be fairly receptive, and then also the Florida Trust for Public Lands. I know the devil's in the details on if we give them a price of what it would cost to acquire. I think probably if you split the pie into thirds and pitched it, then perhaps we might have some traction there, but I don't know exactly. I don't have the expertise on calibrating exactly how much each entity would want to cough up, but I do know that the 3 of them together, we probably could cobble together the funding for the 13.2, and then the city would take on the obligation of maintaining the park in perpetuity.
Yeah, I'm sure that's one of the requirements they would put on us.
Sure.
Seeing how you are a representative on the TDC, and you and I both have relationships with people that are on the Triumph board, that we can continue that discussion as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. The one thing I had some curiosity. Can we invite the attorney for the Capri up? I just wanted to understand the nature of the holdouts on the two property, or the 2 unit owners that may be holding out slightly.
Okay, I had a couple other folks that wanted to weigh in. If y'all don't mind, can we go ahead? That might answer some of your questions as you speak. Mr. Jay, you want just for the public record state who you are?
Jay Roberts, Capri, by the Gulf Homeowners Association. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. Let me just clarify a couple things that I heard were saying. I know I'm nerdy on this stuff, so it's maybe getting way into the weeds, but Capri by the Gulf was a hotel. It was built, I think, in the 1960s, and then it was redeveloped in 1981 and made into townhomes. So it is not a condominium, and that's really a good thing, because if it was a condominium created in 1981, the association would not own the beach. The beach would be common elements owned by all owners, and therefore holdouts would be a problem. And what we have here is townhomes where the association owns all the common areas outside the footprint of each of the units, and then the individual owners own the units. Now, there are 24 units, of which there are some that multiple ownership, which gets you to 22 owners. And of that, I believe that we have 21 units that have signed on, principally, details aside, on this plan. And as for the potential 3 holdout units, it is my understanding there's only been one person that has said she is not interested. Her unit is located in the northeast corner. So this is important, because if you think about this, we can still do all of the things that you are proposed to do, and if she would like to continue to keep her unit there, I don't see that that is a hurdle that cannot be overcome in the deal. I think that cooler heads might prevail in this situation anyways, but I think that that is not a deal killer on that. And as to the other 2, they are both located adjacent to her in that northeast corner. We have not heard a specific objection that I am aware of yet with that. We've just not heard. The rest of them we have heard, and they are interested and have been for some time to do something like this. Any other questions?
Any questions, council members? Any comment? All right, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Might call you back up at a later time, but right now, Ms. Ramswell.
I pretty much just wanted to go back and look at some of these, and this was great, but excellent job. Let's see, go back to what was the first one? Capri by the Gulf, and then Crystal Port.
Capri by the Gulf, you see the location where it is in relation. That just shows you where the Capri by the Gulf is in relation to our present access points, and that's an aerial of the 2.1 acres. That is the Capri by the Gulf, 300 beachfront. Is that, you want me to go on the next one? Shows you the frontal view of where it's located. And that's the other aerial that gives you a better picture of how much beachfront that is. And the beachfront runs basically from the back of the two end units all the way to the wet sand area. And it's 300 foot. And just not only is it 300 foot, but you also have that that dune area or up against the dunes. It's almost what is it, almost a full acre of
What
sand.
was this price of the second one you mentioned, Mayor?
3.6 million on the Crystal Port. And that was
80 linear feet on the beach?
on let's see, let's take a look real quick. Let's go back to it. It was, can you see that? It's 50 feet. And what makes this kind of nice is the fact that we've got 68 feet, I believe, adjacent to it.
Could we possibly, and I know basically we may be pie in the sky with both of these, but can we kind of keep on the same track with both of them and maybe see if we can get the one group, and I can't remember the name of them, that helped us purchase the parks in the past, to work on one, and maybe TDC and some other people to work on the other. And I don't want to throw one out, and I certainly wouldn't want the.
Well, I feel like, we can just put a prioritize on those three, and maybe some other people may step up, we can look at, and we'll just keep trying to find more information. I would imagine our next step would be to get, an appraisal on the Capri and the Crystal Port. Now, Crystal Port has an appraisal, because it's on the MLS, it does have an appraisal that was about, a year and a half old, I think, Steve? We looked at it, so it probably needs an updated appraisal, because the property values have changed a little bit in the last 18 months.
My idea would be Capri and then Crystal Point, number 2.
Okay.
So did you look at the property to the west? Is it owned by the guy that owns that old house as well?
Yes.
And was he interested?
The west of Crystal Port is owned by the same group, except he's in a different contract agreement with us, basically another corporation. So they would have to resolve who would sell it, or if they want to sell it. But they did say that, of course, how that takes a couple years usually, but in the interim, they would actually be willing to lease the beach portion, the white sand, for a fee until that process could take place and that property could become for sale. And that, that's something that we could consider as well. And that would give us a lot bigger footprint.
That's a major access point. It's utilized by the lifeguards as well as, multiple vendors and whatever. It's also one of the most crowded for those same reasons. So that to me would be absolutely a no-brainer. But I'm like Tuffy, I would go after both of them. I mean, we need it desperately, and these are just terrific options.
Mr. Marler.
I just wanted to make a quick comment on the Capri. The property directly to the east was where the old pier was. So that kind of gives y'all a kind of an idea of how, and originally the pier and the Capri were originally owned by the same people back in the late 50s, early 60s. So I know there's been a drive for possibly bringing back a pier. So that's another option we can think about at a later date on that, on a partial of that area.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. I do think acquiring beach access is single-handedly one of the most important issues the city faces. I like both options. I'd like to see us pursue both. At the same time, I think they both are appealing in their own rights. The second option would be a great complement to an already heavily used park, alleviate some pressure there. I don't know where the beach accesses are in relation, or beach points are in relation to.
Pretty close.
Oh, okay, so it's close. But it's a problem, and we're going to have to solve it. And, we can, I like Parker's idea of splitting it into thirds. in terms of funding, committing to some funding. I know Walton County's TDC is aggressively purchasing beachfront properties, and I would like to see our TDC do the same. And I think it's time, because there's no better way to develop tourism than helping resolve this beach issue. And you know it, we all know it, we all deal with it, we all deal with the phone calls. Our locals are angry, our tourists are pissed off, our tourists are coming down here. Go to the Okaloosa County to visit the Emerald Coast website. Do you see pictures of congested beaches and ropes and chains and aggressive beach bouncers aggressively defending their private property? No, you don't. And so they get down here and it's a bait and switch for them. So this is super important. Thanks, good job.
Mr. Amswell?
Yes, I just wanted to bring up the owner of the lot that is immediately west of James Lee Park. It's not on here, but they actually have 69 feet of beach access as opposed to the 50 that we're seeing with the Crystal Port, and they would entertain $5 million if that's something we want to look at as well. It's a vacant lot currently.
Go talk to him.
Yeah, we'll figure that out, huh, Jeff? We'll reach out to them.
We'll go talk to them too, if you could forward us that information.
It's literally, if you've got James Lee, one of those pictures I think had it, where the James Lee driveway is going into like Crab Trap and all that. It's the last lot right there, the last private lot to the west of.
Okay, yeah, we'll jump on that. Now, the only thing I do want to get from y'all is, these people, they got stuff up for sale, so, we got to make an offer while we're trying to find the funding for it. So, myself and our city attorney, can we get the green light to do that now, or do you want us without a motion, or do you want to legislate an action? Okay, we'll just keep doing what we're doing, keep the initiative going. We'll come back to you before we make any hardcore decision. What I'd like to do is take the liberty, myself and our city attorney and our city land use attorney and Mr. Smith, who happens to be a licensed real estate broker, so we can have that discussion and maybe make some counter offers and try to get in a ballpark before we come back to you with real prices, because that's their asking price.
Yeah, and by the way, I may have mentioned this before, but a couple of years ago when Nathan Boyles was chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, he said, bring me beach property. That's what I want to see to try to get funded. Yeah.
We'll see if it's still needs.
Mr. Destin's going to bring him some. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Lastly.
Just point of clarification, we're not going to be making any offers. All right, good.
No, we're going to continue the discussion. At what point, though, we're going to have to make some?
I would like to see, if you could bring back what he's presented, especially the two that we all seem in agreement about, and if y'all are interested in the third one I brought up, just in a document, all the properties, comparisons, that sort of thing, and then we can build on that to do whatever next step it was that you suggested.
And I think what we can do is we'll get that on the agenda where the public can weigh in as well early in the deal. We'll just let people weigh in now that this is public here. And it'll be in our next briefing material. I guess, Lance, the 19th, how stacked up is that one? Can we accomplish some of this stuff in 2 weeks, looking at my city attorneys and my interim city manager? Is that too aggressive?
I won't be here, so it'll be great.
That is what you call, that's what you call delegation of authority. Yeah, we'll put it on the agenda.
We can get it on the agenda.
All right. And then I'll work, Jeff and I and Kyle and Ken, we'll work on this further and come up with some recommendations of what we seek from the council at this point. And then you'll have a TDC meeting by then? Okay, cool. All right, well, lastly, it was brought to my attention by Mr. Smith that we have some beach access, or had, I should say, some beach access that was part of a developmental order of the Silver Shores, or Silver Sands, am I saying? Silver Shells. And he brought it to my attention that there was deeded public access as part of the DO. Now, there's some vague language in there that Ms. Kopp brought up that probably needs to be addressed and may be addressed in court. But that's an overlay of how much access there was. It's under Parcel C and Parcel D. The deeded public access is this 2 squares, from the Gulf of Mexico right there. And I'll give you a picture. That's what the public access looked like. How many months ago, Steve? Last year. Up till spring of this year. Today, or tonight, this is what it looks like. So, as they said back during the space days, Houston, we got a problem. So, Ms. Kopp, would you like to make any comments about this at this present time? Because, you're the one that you shared with me that if this is the way we want to go to look into it, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, the city manager and the community development director and I actually are meeting on this tomorrow, but basically, the requirement that this be a public beach access was a condition of the development order, was a condition of the DOs. But there's some vagueness in the plat maybe because it's not specifically dedicated to the city on the plat. And I haven't seen a recorded document showing the public beach access. But again, like I said, it was a condition of the DO, and the minutes of the city council meeting reflect that it was intended to be public beach access.
And since the development of that project for a number of years, there has been customary use of this as public access.
It actually would be called an implied dedication in this situation, not a customary use. You don't want to use that word.
No, because we don't know if the Indians were walking between those 2 buildings for 300, 400, 500 years. So what'd you call that? What's the term?
There's an implied dedication if it wasn't reflected on the plat, but there's other records that events that was going to be made, and it looks like from this picture here, at one point in time, there was a beach access built allowing people down there, then they would have acquiesced in it.
So that implied dedicated access, and that doesn't, correct?
Yeah, but I think that came later.
Do you have an aerial view?
So yes, we do. So what I would like to see, if it pleases the council, that our attorneys look into this issue with the city manager and come back and give us a report. That's a lot of beach, and it was part of the DO. And like you said, we may send them a letter to deceased and open that back up, and they may say, well, that's not, and then we have to take this to court. But I think it's real clear that our city's interested in people living up to their acts of good faith when that DO was signed. I'm pretty sure that even though it wasn't on the plat, that the intent was to get that development in good faith. They would allow our citizens to access that beach. And that's what it looked like when that was the case, and that's what it looks like now when it's not the case. So if that pleases everyone, I think we'll let them do that.
I have a question too. I believe this is the same property where part of the swimming pool was built in the city's right-of-way. Isn't that correct?
No, this is actually the Sterling Shores, which is part of the Restaurant Row redevelopment. The one you're referring to is Silver Sands.
Silver Shells.
Silver Shells, which, and that pool was built in the old Scenic 98 right-of-way.
And Mr. Schmidt, I appreciate you finding this and letting us know about it. I mean, it's supporting our community, and it may end up our attorneys handling it, but it's something that I appreciate you sharing with me, and it fit right into the whole beach access issue, and that's why I wanted to share it with the council tonight. Mr. Marler.
Also, at Silver Shells, we have 25 parking spaces that we have that's part of the deed, and also part of that area that you walk in front of or behind Silver Shells on the beach area is also supposed to be public access because that's where the original right-of-way for Old 98 was. Mr. Destin's father was on council when I joined, and that was a very controversial issue on that property also. So we need to look into that, if you don't mind, Ms. Kopp, to see what we have over there and what they've blocked off, because I think we have more access over there in Silver Shells besides just Sterling Shores.
Well, every little morsel of sand is extremely important to our community, whether you're a resident or a visitor, and if nothing else, just the optics of it. So that's what's going to be our priority. I think it's going to take a team effort between our designated council people, myself, and our attorneys, and our staff, who did a good job identifying that. And that's all I got for tonight. If anyone, no further questions or comments over this issue, I'll just declare this meeting adjourned.